Welcome to the upstreamlife.com. I'm your founder and editor, Vishal Krishna. I love food. I'm curious about food. I'm curious about its history. In fact, I go and study things like what are the origins of Indian food. But I have a food scientist with me, the founder of thinkingfolks.com, Rinka Banerjee. How are you?
Thank you for having me here, Vishal, and I'm doing well.
You should tell me about Thinking Folks and why should startups talk to you, or anybody, even the large food companies, talk to you?
So Thinking Folks is a food R&D end-to-end solutions kind of a company, and we help startups as well as large companies launch new products into the market. So if you're a startup and you have a great idea, our tagline is bring food and nutrition ideas to life. That's really our purpose and the goal with which we've done Thinking Folks.
I mean, you have a lab, so they should come check,
Yes.
test your food. By the way, it's a 530 billion opportunity in another 4 years. So you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. You want to be compliant. You want to know standards. And Rinka can help you. Rinka, thank you for being on my show. I've been a fan of food. Obviously, everybody is a foodie in our country, the way we consume food. But the story of food is completely different than how it's evolved. And you've been in that industry for 3 decades now.
Yep.
You've been an entrepreneur for a decade. Who better than you to tell us how food's evolved in this country? I see people doing food podcasts. There are niche media companies around food. But you're the bee's knees when it comes to food, according to me. So tell me, what does Thinking Folks do? And that's your company.
Great. Thank you so much for having me over, Vishal. And so Thinking Folks is an end-to-end R&D solutions company, and we work with startups, we work with large companies, and we help them provide a food solution, which is bringing a new product to market. It could be product packaging. What can you claim on the product? How do you get it manufactured? How do you source your ingredients? What kind of regulations do you need to get through to get your product to market, and so on? So we really help companies through a complete back end of how do you bring a product to market. So I think that's been an incredible journey, I would say, for us in the last 10 years. We've launched about 200 plus products for almost close to 100 clients. So it's been a very, very interesting journey.
And how
for
many
us.
brands? 200 products, and they're all brands?
There would be at least about maybe 70, 75 brands, So yeah, so there's been
This is international as well, right?
Yes, international as well.
That's interesting. So international ones coming into India too.
Absolutely. So we've had companies, and this was probably around COVID is when we started getting a lot of queries coming in from the US, for example, Southeast Asia, asking for help on certain products because we have the expertise that can help them through either it's, like I said, a new product or manufacturing and so on. And also working with a lot of companies and labs, universities, stuff like that. So I think that ecosystem is so strong that a lot of companies have been coming to us, for help, whether it's a new product or sometimes it's even things like cost savings. So one of the large dairy companies that we worked with in the US, we were actually able to identify cost-saving opportunities for them, which was close to about $15 million, and this was all sitting here in Bangalore, getting all the work done for North America. So I think in today's world, that's also possible.
That's interesting. So you're not just a consultant, you're a lab.
Yes.
You can test the food.
Mm-hmm.
You can say that, okay, this is how you have to launch it. This is the palette that people like. You could do that too.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk about you. You're a food scientist.
Mm-hmm.
That itself says volumes about you.
Mm-hmm.
And you worked with a large FMCG company, right? You want to talk about your journey quickly before people then, want to know more about you in terms of what Thinking Folks does.
Absolutely.
So your journey quickly, please.
So I started this 10 years ago. Prior to that, I was with Unilever, and that was about 16 years of, working with Unilever. The last 5, I was heading R&D for them. And Unilever was a fabulous journey because it takes you through all the different categories. You may be an R&D person, but you're working very closely with marketing and finance. So you get to know everything that it requires to get something out there in the market. So I think that was a fantastic experience with Unilever. And prior to that, I was in the US for a couple of years. And I did things like Haagen-Dazs.
Through Lever?
No, that was with another consulting firm. In fact, it was an interesting journey because my first 3 years of my career was with a consulting firm out of upstate New York. And I was working for Haagen-Dazs and Slim Fast brands.
What did you study? I'm just curious now.
I did my master's in food science. I did my bachelor's in dairy. So I'm an out-and-out food F&B person. Last 30 years been doing that.
It's so interesting. So you just moved from being a scientist, your exposure in levers allowed you to think marketing, finance, and then set up Thinking Folks.
Absolutely.
What I realized is these large brands have a method to the madness when it comes to food, right? I heard that many experiments that also fail, that they literally are very anal about getting their product strategy right, the taste and the palate right before they launch something. And I heard many experiments just go way off and then they just bury them. and that they're very focused on how people consume, or things have changed since?
I think things have changed. I think when I started working for a large company like Unilever, it was like you said, very methodical, and everything had to be ticked off, and you had to do your large, quantitative studies and so on. But today, even with large companies, and we work with quite a few large companies, we see there is a huge test and learn approach. Where you say, okay, let's get it out there. And today, because there's e-commerce, there's so many different channels, right? So you're able to put something there, test it out for a couple of months. It doesn't work for various reasons. You're able to pull it back. That was not there maybe 10 years, 15 years ago. It was very like, you would spend a lot of money trying to get a product right. And that's the thing with large companies. I mean, you would make sure that, the money that you're investing behind is really well researched. It's embedded in consumer and customer insights. That's super important. So I think, but today there's a lot of this. Let's quickly test and learn.
Have they learned something from the startups, which is when I think you picked up on a nice opportunity 10 years ago to start thinking Fox. And was that opportunity because you saw a lot of young brands, people people like you who've been in the industry, who suddenly realized that they could launch something on the internet and, and understand consumer preferences very fast and launch it at speed, as compared to some of these larger companies?
Absolutely. And I think, and that's what has made us, launch, like I said, 200 products in 10 years. That's like 20 products a year, right? As compared to what I did in about 15 years, I must have launched about 20, 25 products maybe.
That's a rapid pace.
That's a rapid pace. And I think that's where you're absolutely right. I think the larger companies have learned from startups. That part of it is to saying, how do you go quickly, test and learn and stuff like that. Where we have seen, things evolve, let's say even for the startups, when they come to us, for example, they come to us with a very sketchy idea, saying, I want to launch this, and I think this is a great opportunity and all of that. What we actually help them do right at the very beginning, and this is something I spend a lot of time with startups on, saying, are you sure? What is your right to win? Right? Who are you competing against? If I didn't buy your product, what would I buy instead? So, initially they do get a little overwhelmed with so much of questioning, but that then, sets the agenda absolutely right for getting your product right and all of that. That comes a little later. I think that's the learning from a large organization. I've been able to transfer it onto the younger ones. And that's exactly the opportunity I saw about 10 years ago. Because when I was leaving Unilever and I realized that in this part of the world, there wasn't a outfit which could support a lot of smaller mid-sized companies which didn't have access to R&D per se, right? There is some in Australia, US and all of that, but in India it wasn't there. And that was the opportunity I saw, and I said, let's try this out. So I think that's been interesting.
Let's quickly delve into some history.
Sure.
Retail has always been around in India. Indians consumed fresh food.
Yeah.
Right? They went to their local markets, which was, again, geographically, if you look at Bangalore, it sources everything from Kolar or towards Mysore region, comes into the city. There's retailers, organized, unorganized, more so unorganized. And the food was always driven as fresh food. But there was always these fringe players like frozen prawns.
Yep.
There was always shrimp was always around. And everything else around the supply chain was fresh. But the last 10 years, I've seen, pork items frozen, fresh, delivered to you. We've seen the rise of people like Licious. We've seen Nandu's. We've seen many such brands come in every category.
Yep.
Frozen food, fresh food, but packaged.
Yep.
Right? How do you look at that evolution for the last 30 years? We went from SMB manufacturing processed food, to, you get everything. You get QSR.
Yep.
You get gourmet.
Yep.
Name it, you have it online. And I'll pick your brains on how do you work with each of these categories, provided you tell me the history of the evolution.
Yeah. So I think, in India, we've always been a very fresh food consuming consumers, right? So we like to make everything fresh and stuff like that. Today, because of paucity of time, etc., people are moving towards buying more semi-processed kind of stuff, which is, easier. Like today, there are DIY meal kits and whatnot, right? But what we've seen is in India, one of the things that has evolved well is the whole supply chain at the back end. Yeah, in terms
very
of
robust, is it?
It is getting there. I don't think we're still very much where we need to be internationally, but we're getting there.
Okay, quick quick note on what you mean by a robust supply chain, quickly.
So in terms of, getting your food wastage, not being as much as it should be, perishability of your products, things like that. Today, for example, millets. I mean, we are probably the world's largest millet guys, and we've got now improving our ragi supply chain. All of that has improved hugely. And I think we have a huge opportunity over there. So I think that was one thing that, how do you get your back end absolutely right in terms of the right quality, sourcing, accreditations, things like that. For example, we worked for a very large organic food brand who had got their organic food part right very well. So we in fact worked with them to get some of their food safety systems, etc. in place. And then to say, how do you add value? So the first part is to just get a good, clean, fresh commodity in a packaged, safe, way. And I think that's one part we've been working with a large pizza company, for example, today, where a lot of the raw materials, etc., they source, but ensuring that their processing sites, which is either at the sourcing level or at the manufacturing level, are of the highest quality food safety systems and stuff.
Said. I mean, the history itself is about what's happening currently.
Yes.
Like you mentioned, this pizza company, what is the primary ingredient? Wheat?
Yes.
Maida, these processed vegetables, right? Mostly onions, capsicums and other things, right? How do you ensure that they're all safe? That's where you come in.
Absolutely. So we ensure that, the kind of specifications you have of the materials that you're getting in.
Can you track it back to the farmer?
In many cases, you can.
Okay.
Many cases you can. That work is still going on traceability and so.
There.
Absolutely. Okay. So getting their specifications right, what the incoming quality checks are right, things like that. So even your farmer is producing to a certain standard and specification. We helped a very large millet company in Chennai, and again, it was the same thing, setting the specifications and standards right, so that where you're sourcing from is produced to a certain spec. Which is then going to go forward for consumers, etc. So there's a lot of standardization at the back end, which has evolved, and it's still evolving.
Okay.
But that I think has gone well for India so far.
Do the young brands appreciate this standardization? Or should they?
So to some extent, I'll tell you where it's really helped.
Because they'd come and say that, look, I launched the brand anyway. I have partners who standardize it.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about what's reaching the consumer. At least I offer quality product. But the standardization is left to my partners, the manufacturing guys or the farmers.
Correct.
Would you say that you have to control this chain as a brand?
It is important to control the chain. And in fact, we've helped a couple of cafe, gourmet cafe kind of guys, right? The chocolates and confectionaries and stuff like that. We did for a fresh food delivery, right? And you'll see a lot of that, right? Today there's Swiggy and EatFit and a whole bunch of people who are delivering stuff. How do you ensure that your back end, that you're delivering to a consumer, it's fresh? So the consumer experience is fresh and all of that. But at the back end, you have standardized your processes to ensure it's safe, it's higher shelf life, all of that. So ensuring, and your storage conditions are right, your standard operating procedures are right. So we've actually helped companies standardize all of that at the back end. So today they can go large. They can go onto an Amazon big basket as well as do fresh food delivery across India. So I think those are interesting things we're seeing.
Okay, Rinka, I'm glad we are going so fast in the history part of it, because evolution is in the supply chain. It is pretty evolved. The wastage is 35%. This 35% number has been around for a while. I don't know how much it is currently. I'm quoting 2010 numbers. I was talking to a large food distribution company, and they said the wastage is still the same. I don't know why, but we've got dairy, right? I'm sure we've got dairy. Is there a lot of wastage?
So I think in India,
the wastage is in agri-produce.
Agri-produce. We have a lot of wastage over there still. And I think there is a huge amount of work. In fact, we want to do more work on food wastage reduction. We've done some stuff for a fruit company in Southeast Asia, but I believe that there is a huge opportunity in India for us to reduce it.
Okay.
And we're seeing some startups do some very interesting work. Like, I met some guy in Coimbatore who said, I go and pick up food from every wedding that is happening, because there's a huge amount of wastage. What do we do with that food that's getting wasted? We give it to schools, we give it to, we process it in a way that it's safe and all of that. But the agri-food wastage is quite large.
Okay.
We need to do something about that.
But we've got the butchery side right. Every time I open my Instagram, there's something on buffalo meat that I saw recently, which is interesting. I wouldn't know how the supply chain for that works. I know poultry would be fixed very much in India with the Nandos of the world or the Sudanas of the world. So meat, we are fine. You're saying it's only in the agri side that we struggle a little bit.
Dairy has also evolved for sure, but agri side, I think there's still quite a bit of
And
wastage.
suddenly I hear gourmet chocolates coming out of India, and some of them are gold winners, or bronze winners, or
Exactly.
silver medalists in global events, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you do any whiskey as well. Is that a supply chain?
No, we haven't yet done an alcohol project, but yeah, I mean, I've done it in my past avatars in the US, but not here.
Okay, but great. So when I look at the typical startup person who comes here in food, is that a typical person who's made money in technology who then or have legacy money, and they come and say, we want to launch a QSR restaurant specific, and then we do packaged food with that. We have a restaurant plus packaged food. Some of them are doing that.
Yeah.
Some of them just plainly say, we'll launch it online packaged, and we only want to be D2C. What's the typical color of the entrepreneur like? But do they have a background of food? That's another question.
Not really. I mean, in fact, a lot of them who come to us actually have no background in food. And that's why they come to us, because they're like, we don't understand all of this, but we believe this is a good opportunity, right?
They just come for the opportunity.
They think it's a good opportunity.
How big is the opportunity though? Let's
it's like that. India processed food is going to be a $530 billion sector by about 2027 or something.
That's only a few years away.
That's only a few years away,
530 billion.
530
and this
billion.
is just consumption.
This is consumption, right? So these are like huge numbers we're talking about.
That's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost half of retail. It's huge.
So there is a huge opportunity, and that's something we saw in COVID. Everything else suffered and all of that. Of course, food suffered because of supply chain and stuff, but people realize that this is an industry which is going to survive come what may. It is going to be something that you need every day, right? So, just to answer your question on who are the kind of people who come to us, many times there are people who worked in FMCG companies or working in maybe a personal care or something else. So they understand the whole go-to-market piece and they want to get the R&D and all of that from a product. That's one type. Couple of people come from the IT sector, but not too many, I would say. We've even had clients who are in housing. They're into real estate, have never done food before. And then suddenly they have decided to do food. It's interesting. And also the other thing that we are seeing is in India, a lot of medium scale manufacturers who've actually set up very large manufacturing facilities, etc., saying, hey, we can manufacture, we can source, so why can't we brand and sell? So there are some very interesting type of clients that we're now beginning to see that's evolving in India who are very interested in the F&B space.
And who would be the most successful in your 10-year journey? Can you name some? I mean, you don't have to name the entrepreneurs, but you could talk about what sectors they got into in food and why they got it right. Again, you've set the context for standardization. There's no escaping it. If you're an entrepreneur in food, you got to understand standards and compliance, which you will help them with. But what do you call a successful brand? How do they become a successful brand?
Yeah.
Do you have such examples?
Oh, no, absolutely. And just, I think some of the sort of categories and brands where we have seen a lot of good success happening. One big space is overall health and wellness. Whether it's a high protein nutrition bar, whether it's, Ayurveda, and we saw a lot around Ayurveda, etc. Even before COVID. There was a lot of that was happening. So I think health and wellness brands that have played in this spaces, people who've played with natural, cleaner label kind of products have done well, right? The other space that we've seen people do well is indulgence. And I mean, I know they are diametrically, and I'm saying they're diametrically opposite kind of stuff. Like, say, you've got gourmet popcorns, you've got ready-to-drink coffees, you've got, things like that, where people today are going and indulging in some interesting cuisines. Today, everyone goes to a third wave or multiple different...
Third wave is one of the new entrants they've done very well in coffee.
So, and they go and experience something new, right? And that's something that people are looking for in indulgence as well. So we've helped a lot of these kind of companies launch some very interesting products out there. So these are two areas where we have seen a lot of work, a lot of sort of successful brands, I would say. The other area we've seen is nutraceuticals, where it's very functional.
Everything is about this gut health. There is mental health, food for mental health, things like that. Are they successful?
So a lot of them in the whole gummy capsule tablet format, we've seen that successful.
For kids too. Are they good? Are they clinically proven?
A lot of them are. A lot of them are not. So a lot of them go by ingredient claims and stuff. So so that's an interesting space that we're seeing as well. But overall, if you ask me, cleaner label, I would say not completely clean label, a cleaner label, healthier foods are most of the brands we've seen have done well. We just recently did for Noodles brand, which was completely not fried. So we're saying it's not fried, it's air dried, and it's made with multi-grains and whatnot, right? I think these are things that consumers are looking for.
Maybe it's on maida also.
Exactly, it is whole wheat. So I think reductionism of things like it's lower fat and all that is probably a little bit more passé, but more like it is clean label, it's got whole grain, it's made with jaggery and whatever.
Yes.
Those things are where we are seeing, is interesting.
Do you also advise on the pricing? Whether you like it or not, India is price sensitive.
Yes,
I've
yes.
seen a lot of brands make that mistake saying, no, I will focus on that 300,000 customers
Yeah,
and make money through them. But even they are price sensitive,
yeah,
right? I mean, how should I put this? For example, they'll say, I want gourmet chocolates, but they want the price to be really at that. I mean, I
Exactly.
wouldn't want to say afford it because they can afford it,
yeah.
but they want subscriptions.
Sure.
I don't know how the palette is changed.
Yeah.
How, the market, how do you look at the market? Could you be overly priced out sometimes? I've seen certain coffee brands that came in, had to reduce their pricing for the Indian palate and even change. I mean, I've seen that happen to KFC. I've seen that happen to McDonald's, which we've done wonderfully well. What are some of the challenges in terms of pricing for these brands?
So, for example, we did for, and I can tell this, Auric is a really nice Ayurveda beverage. Auric beverage. Yeah, it's a coconut water, and then they've done many other products.
And coconut water is good for you. It's
Exactly.
proven for your gut too. It's very
and I
good,
think what Deepak got absolutely right was making sure that he's giving a beverage with all the benefits, and it was, efficacious and all of that. Clean label, but at the right price. So it was, I think, at the time when he had launched, I think it was less than $50. It was some 40 something like that. So you are okay to try that out at that price, right? Similarly, on the other side, we've also seen, chocolate box and things like that selling at a much higher price, but consumers are very willing to pay that price because it's indulgent. They really like it. They don't get a similar option somewhere else. The other thing is I'll use it for gifting, for example. So a lot of that, I think today, people want to see value, and I always believe that value is important. Value is experience, and what value I assign to a product, I'm okay to pay if I genuinely believe in that product, that it's doing something for me. So while in certain categories like snacking, for example, people are very price sensitive. Yeah, if you give me a bar for like $100, I'm probably not going to buy it, right? But if you give me a really indulgent, I don't know, some chocolate for $100, I'll probably try it.
Yeah.
So it's really what value I'm assigning to what you're offering me. And we've seen both of these things, coexist in some ways.
It's interesting. Indian palates itself, how do you look at it? Cities versus semi-urban.
Yeah.
India has about 56 cities with 1 million population. And they're aspirational. For example, you go to Indore, it's so international they want international items. And I don't know whether they're doing it because they can afford it, or which one do you see as a city of experiments? Is Bangalore the city of experiments? Mumbai the city of experiments when it comes to food? I know certainly cloud kitchens are all over the place today. What do people want? Where are people expressing themselves?
I think people are experimenting everywhere, and the number of restaurants you see popping up in Bangalore obviously you can be pretty assured that Bangalore is a great place to experiment and try out and stuff. But we've seen this in Hyderabad, Bombay, everywhere, right? And also the fact that when you are stepping out and having these interesting food outside of home, you also coming back in home expecting those kind of experiences, So I think that's is a good space. In terms of palate, we have seen, like I said, I mean, people are looking at the traditional ethnic kind of stuff, which is always going to be a larger part. Like we've got paperboard, and I launched a brand called Tasty Tales, and we said let's launch something which is with, your grandmom's recipe of cooking paste, which you can make in 5-10 minutes, and it did well. And of course, we've paused it for now, but it's done well.
Food yourself, right?
Yes, we did a brand for us, and then. But on the other hand, we've seen a lot of people experimenting a huge amount at home. So they want to try new flavors, new cuisines, things like that. So we've done let's say we've seen something with Thai and Mexican and Italian. And I don't know how to cook it. So can I make it in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, things like that. So though that's an interesting opportunity we are seeing.
Rinka, is it the stickiness that's the challenge today with the number of experiments that are happening in food?
People are flirting a lot. So they will keep moving from different options. The stickiness factor is more to do with things which you will use every day. People, let's say I may or may not have a bar every day, but I will have, let's say, a pack of chips, or I'll have a biscuits or whatever, those kind of categories which are more staple. And that's where we've also seen the larger brands, I feel, should be more responsible in terms of the kind of products and the kind of nutrition aspects that they're bringing into the food. I think they're still with very high amounts of sugar, they have very high amounts of unrefined flours, palm fats, all that stuff. I think there's still a job to be done there if you want to get
the sustainability aspect.
Sustainability and just overall health. I mean, can you get better, slightly better, nutritionally better products out there? So I think that's an important job to do. But between the more tier 2, tier 3 towns versus, let's say, Bangalore, Bombay, etc., this whole thing of cleaner label, natural, 100% natural, we would say is a little bit more of an urban phenomena. But in the lower tier kind of cities, it's more about taste, right? And price. Those are very price sensitive markets.
How many of your consumers get customers get this story right? When I say story, standardization, making sure that the product is traceable, quality. How many of them tick the box saying they've done all of this? They're making sure that they're focused on health of the person consuming it too.
So I would say if I were to look at some of our companies, which are large companies and large clients, they will get it 100% right. They would usually never launch anything if it's not 100% right.
You don't want to sign such clients.
Sure. We do work with a lot of these kind of clients, right? So they will usually make sure.
But do they listen to you when you say that you have to get these things right?
They do. They do.
They see the importance of being compliant.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, before I came into this podcast, by the way, I was on a call with an international client sitting out of Singapore. And we said, you know what, out of these claims, this one you cannot make. Yeah. And why you cannot make was very clear. And they said, okay, we understand. We get it. Why not? As long as you're able to, convince them that this is the reason you can't. So I think it's
example,
feasible.
I like the example of the noodle brand that you mentioned, where you cannot do it's air fried.
Yes.
And it's whole wheat.
Yep.
It's far better than, the other ones out there, which is unrefined maida, perhaps, right?
A lot of them have maida. Yes.
That's interesting. So I'm glad you said that you want to work with people who want to make a difference too. In the market, and it's again evolving, right? It's one is the litigious consumer, and the businesses itself are still experimenting, would you say?
Yes, I mean, I think let's take Wicked Good, which is the noodle brand that we did, and I think I'm hoping that's doing well for them. But if you see, I think have they made a disruption in that market today? Do consumers have an option to make a healthier choice? Yes, they do, right? So they've got non-fried, it has got multi-grain, and so on and so forth. Yes, we have to get the taste right because Indian consumers at the end of the day just want the taste absolutely 100% right. So those kind of things are always a challenge that most startups and everybody else needs to work towards. But I think that's worked well for these kind of companies where they have gone and taken on a large category, disrupted that in some way. Even if I look at Yoga Bar, I think Suhasini, and they've done a fabulous job of disrupting.
They've been around a decade.
They've done a fabulous job. So I think some of these, and we've worked with all of these brands, and I think that's the interesting part of the journey that we've seen. And I think that's what's also led to their success, that they've taken on large sort of spaces, identified a good white space opportunity. There is nobody else offering that, making that offer. So you're giving consumers choices. Today, I think consumers are actually like you go to a Starbucks and you stand there and you look at multiple things. It's like that even in packaged food.
Yes.
You're getting lots of different choices, which I think is a great place for India to be in.
Rinka, we spoke so much, several things to catch up because food is so vast. I can talk to you for hours and hours, but we still have some time left. So I want to start with international brands. You mentioned a couple of European brands and Singapore brands may come to India or look at the global play and they work with you. What do they see in India? One, I completely think of the evolving food processing ecosystem, the manufacturing maybe. You should talk about that. The other is the talent, which is most important. Why do they come to us for the talent? It's like, I mean, I know IT outsourcing, they come here for the IT work, but I didn't know they do it for food too.
Yeah. So in the international client space, we work with two kinds. I mean, some of them are looking at India as a market, and we know that it's a huge consumer market, huge consumer pool. You see a lot of companies today from Indonesia, Korea. I mean, you must have seen Korean noodles, selling all of that.
One of them, can you believe
super
it?
Spicy and whatever.
Unbeknown to me, there were brands that were advertising, and I actually ordered a couple of them and I enjoyed them.
Absolutely.
It's better than the Maggi.
So,
I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but I enjoyed it. After 30 years of having quick Maggi noodles or whatever, these brands were a welcome change for me.
I know. So I think, that's an interesting space. Of course, a lot of these brands still manufacture their products outside and then they import it.
Outside,
so they've got distribution guys who can distribute everywhere. And we'll come to that because manufacturing, I think, is still an important one.
Okay.
We need to look at that. So that's one type of, customers who are looking at India. So what regulations do we need to cross over, etc., to make sure that they are compliant.
Yes.
So we help them with that. That's, the compliance part.
are they healthy though? Just tell me that.
Not all of them.
Okay,
No.
great, but
Some maybe,
it's
but
just
not all
comfort
of them.
food for just one time. Great.
Because they're just trying out Indian consumers, and we are now so hungry for trying out different things, right? So we're being very experimental.
So one is they look at India as a great
Yes.
market, that $530 billion market.
Absolutely.
That's great. So you can help them
Absolutely.
with the compliance and the standards.
So, yeah.
But they also want to expand globally. And that's where you come
Absolutely.
in.
And then they look at, what kind of products would Indian consumers like,
Mhm.
right? And we've helped companies identify, consumer palettes, what their insights are, what do you get it right, etc. So that's one piece. The other piece is to actually help them with some of their deliverables or deliveries in their markets. So for example, we worked with a very large fruit company which had multiple different problem statements. One was around saying, can we get cost right? And like I told you about a dairy company where we help them getting their costs right and doing all the work sitting here with the talent pool that we have, and we'll talk about that.
How do they measure? Because you're not there in
Mhm.
their country
Mhm.
or in their markets.
Yeah.
But you can still measure.
Absolutely.
Because in the digital world, it's so easy to get data.
It's so easy. Like the same company, I'll give you an example, right? They came to us saying, hey, we process a lot of pineapple, right? We have pineapples which are grade B, grade C, which don't make it to the retail shelf because, if you go to a Carrefour or a Tesco's, etc., they need the best in class product to be there, right? The best in quality product. So what do you do with that? Can you identify technologies which can process this fruit? We said, okay, we will do the research. We worked around, we did a lot of secondary research, this and that. We evaluated some technologies in UC Davis and something else in Canada. And we finally went down to a company in Canada which had a microwave processing unit. And they said, yeah, you can do trials here. Can you believe it? This is all pre-COVID. Huh? So we are doing work here. We're doing the research here. The trials happened at Cornell University in US because we had a partner lab in US who said, okay, I'll take this concept. I'll get the trials done. Our client sitting in Singapore approved the product, and today they have licensed the technology from this Canadian company. So it's possible to do that sitting here as long as you know how to, sort of connect all the dots. And that's been our experience. That's been our experience. Yeah. And which is why a lot of companies like these guys have been coming to us. We've done stuff for Dole, we've done it for Danone, we've done for Mars, we've done for multiple different companies. And,
these companies are already big in India anyway.
Yeah. So some of them are big in India. A lot of them we've done work for their other markets. And because we've got some very solid talent sitting with us, our leadership team
talent?
is all.
Quickly tell us about the talent.
So we are about 30.
I think of food scientists for sure. Then I look at everybody as a marketing and salesperson. But there's something in between that I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the talent?
So we are about 35 people in our company. Our leadership team, which is pretty much guys with product, packaging, nutrition, manufacturing expertise.
End to end.
Yes.
Okay.
We're all, the leadership team is all with 25, 30 years, been in the industry, large companies.
So it's design too.
Yeah.
Portion sizes.
Absolutely. So product, packaging, design. What can you claim
Not
on
just
the product?
Taste, the sizing,
yeah,
the packaging, the design, colors, everything.
Well, we don't do the graphic part of it, but we work with a lot with the agencies. So our nutrition team, for example, will say, what can you claim on this product? So when we did one of the large snack innovations that happened, which was about baked, not fried, that claim and everything came from us, right? So it's 50% lower fat than any other chips and stuff like that. So things like that. So that's what we do. The rest of the operating team, we've got people who are chefs, who are food scientists, packaging technologists, nutritionists. So we've got a very interesting team. And I think that's where a lot of the international companies see the experience and expertise that we have, but there's a huge cost arbitrage of getting that done in India. So sitting here, being able to service the world, I think is a huge opportunity for us, and we should do more of it. I've had people come and say, why is it that Israel is so ahead on innovation and they do all of this? I think you guys sitting out of Bangalore in India can do a fabulous job because you guys have great talent and you've got, good experience and stuff.
How strong is the India regulation? I mean, there's a regulator for finance. Obviously, it's RBI, and there's a regulator for insurance. It's IRDA, but the food, it's FSSAI.
Yeah.
And how strong are they?
Oh, they're very good. And I think, Mr.
Because everybody says FDA, but is it as strong?
No. The Food Safety Standards Authority, I think, have done a fabulous job. And I think Mr. Agarwal is someone we work with a lot now. And he used to be the CEO. And and I think we've set up some great standards when it comes to, all the basic food safety requirements for all the different categories. Today, when companies are importing products into India, they have to be compliant to certain regulations. Absolutely. So a lot of imported products today have to be compliant to the food safety regulations here. And we are in line with the global regulations. So we are not far behind at all.
Okay.
And we are going far ahead. So I think in that sense, we have moved leaps and bounds when it comes to regulations. It's become a lot friendlier. Today, all your licensing is happening online. You just upload everything, you get something. You don't have to give it to some agent and give nothing of that sort.
So that's what people think, right, when you start. So that's why startups have done very well.
Amazingly well. So I think, these are all things which have become enablers.
Great. You mentioned global brands. We talked briefly about regulation and regulators. I want you to talk about sprints. Can a brand work with you on sprints?
Yeah.
Because they have end-to-end. I'm sure the startups work on a few things first and then the end-to-end. How do international brands work vis-a-vis local brands with you?
And in fact, that's been one of our USPs as well in terms of the process that we follow. It's sort of a bit of a design thinking process, right? So you say, I will work in modular sprints. We will first do ideation. We do product development and stuff like that. If that goes through the next, then you move into the next. And we cost it out as well like that. We do it in modular sprints. Sometimes we have companies who will come and say, we want the entire end-to-end, but we will review this every, couple of sprints as we keep moving along. And sometimes I've had startups come and say, hey, you want to do just this part? Do this part. Go out there, maybe get for your seed funding or whatever, and then come back. So we've had, multiple different ways we can do this. But this has been one of the reasons why people come to us rather than trying to sell this huge end-to-end thing and say, you have to do the entire project with me. Not really. Just tell me this part. Let's get this part right. Then we move to the next part. I think that's been probably a USP for us.
Most of them launch the brands and forget customer service as well. Do they figure out that feedback? Do you help them with that?
So, a lot of times things like FAQs, you put on your Amazon A+ content, right? Sometimes we have seen, and this is where we've seen brands sometimes fail, is also putting the wrong kind of communication. Because today consumers are not dumb. They can go out there, there's ChatGPT and whatever, right? They can go and get information. So, we do make sure that what they're putting onto these different platforms, and when you have a consumer asking a question, what kind of answers do you need to give? What is the reality? Things like that, which is where all our experience matters, right? So that's what we are able to help them out with. Yeah.
How appreciative are the consumers? And for example, I had a problem with the gummy bears product that I was using, and I would definitely write to these brands saying there's a problem. But the communication is not effective. It'll take a few days. They have fixed that, no?
So there are and some of the large companies have actually done that very well. They have service level agreements with their guys in terms of saying these are the responses, and that will be vetted by people like us. And they have to have a certain turnaround time within 48 hours, 24 hours, things like that. It's getting better, I would say. But if you don't get the customer service part right, you don't get the front end part right, then no matter how good your product is, it's not going to sell.
Really?
So yes. I think it's super important.
And consumers are unforgiving in India. No?
So consumer experience, I keep telling guys, that successful brands, and you asked me this earlier, what they get right, they get this customer experience part right. And in food, we especially with a lot of the D2C kind of brands, we talk about unboxing experience, and we've helped one really fancy gourmet, chocolate kind of a company. And the whole way that you unbox it, you see certain information, it's almost personalized communication. All of that is like you then get floored, right? Then you're willing to pay that, whatever, $500 for a bag of chocolates or whatever. So I think all that is changing. It's evolving.
The big brands have the marketing might. I'm glad you said sprints, work on sprints for the smaller ones.
Yeah.
The marketing might versus the younger brands. How do you see these future experiments play out? What do you see in 2027? Do you see the larger guys think in terms of sprints? They come to you and say, we'll work in sprints. Let's launch, let's experiment, let's fail, let's launch again. Will the system that they are allow them to do it? Or will the smaller guys get bigger and bigger?
So, the larger guys are already doing that. So we are seeing.
So the smaller guys better watch out and do well.
We are already doing that with some of the larger guys, because they're already saying, let's work in these little modular sprints. Let's get this right. Let's fix this. Let's move on to the next one. So I think everybody is now a lot more open about how they want to do that. Agile, a lot more agile. Yeah, and I think that's something that the larger guys have learned from the startups, I would say, is to become a lot more agile. But I think what's going to be very important for both, whether it's a startup or large company, is to really be very, very sharp about the consumer insight that you're chasing or you're going after.
Give us an insight. What is an insight? Give an example.
For example, I would say when we did something, and this was, and I can say the brand, we've done this for 2Yum, right? When they disrupted the market, right, in snacking, there was a lot of fried chips and this and that, right? And we went out there and say, what's the opportunity here? Why would consumers say, I'm very happy to have a fried chips and whatever? Why would they pay you extra and whatnot, right? And that's when there was a lot of consumer work that had already happened. And we then identified some of these little interesting claim areas. And we'd done a claims workshop, which was like, I think a day or a day and a half or whatever. We generated about 300 plus claims for them, saying that these are the different opportunities. One thing that we then, all of us, along with the agencies and all that, found this opportunity of saying the fact that it's not a fried snack, right? That's one negative factor. Similarly, when you say, I'm giving you a product which has got lesser sugar or it's got no sugar, things like that, those are opportunities, So today people are talking about no refined white sugar.
Yes.
And you'll see lots of brands talking about it. The more you see it, the more convinced you're going to be. And therefore, it's about identifying those sweet spots, saying that, yes, this is an interesting insight. If you look at ID, right, dosa batter, nobody would have actually gone and said, oh, I want a dosa batter which, is ready for me, etc. Nobody would have articulated that.
Yes.
But for you to identify that insight and say, hey, this is where the opportunity is, something that takes 12 hours to ferment, I will do it and give it to you ready. Today, I can have a dosa batter, same thing in Delhi or Bangalore is an interesting innovation, right?
Yeah. The funny is, because of our age also, the way we thought, the idea of chocolates, for example, has changed from the 80s, 70s, 80s to now. And today, chocolate means, there's some form of cocoa content that's higher, 35% plus, they say. We were used to chocolates that they were actually candies. They're mostly sugar, no?
Yeah.
That's changed. Now the consumer wants to know more.
70% of chocolate.
Yes. So now people are getting that information and brands are doing that.
Yeah.
And the sugar movement is very important too.
Yes.
So there's this Indian who's becoming a fitness freak, expressing himself globally. Do you see that only in certain segments, or do you see that happening across segments now? It will happen at the lower income segments too?
So I think people are beginning to get a little bit more open in terms of making healthier choices, I would say. And so therefore health is important. And I wouldn't say it's less important if it's a lower socioeconomic or whatever. It's either saying that, honestly, it's okay if I have a little bit of sugar and whatever, but if you're giving me additional protein or you're giving me multigrain or whatever, which helps my child grow, I'm happy to invest the money to do that, right? Because everybody wants something which is good for their family and children and so on. So I don't see that change, and I think it's only going to get better and better. Where I feel sometimes brands, overpromise, I would say, is to try and say, I'm just because I am, no refined sugar and I am clean label, etc. So you've got to pay me like 5 times the price that I would pay otherwise. I think that economics, we have to get it right.
Okay.
You can't be over-promising and charging a huge fat amount for something which is it's good to have. I appreciate it, but am I going to be putting that kind of money behind it, right?
Yeah.
Like people talk about it's 100% natural and all that is important.
That's your point. You like sustainability, right?
Yes.
And what does sustainability mean to you when it comes to food? And you're very you're very curious to understand that where India moves in that segment.
Yes.
What do you mean by sustainability in food?
So I think today, if you ask anybody about sustainability, they will first and foremost talk about packaging, right? So they say, less plastic usage, which is fine.
Seriously, right?
So people are beginning to get there. I think India is evolving. I would say it's still evolving because a lot of these things cost money.
These brands that we use we order online of food and groceries. Some of them come in plastics.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's a challenge.
So I think that's improving. You'll see with more, unlike today, the straws are becoming with not plastic. That's a good thing. So we are migrating. We're slowly evolving, and I think that's a good thing. We have to get our costs right because a lot of these single family plastics are more sustainable. The problem that we see is, and my packaging director will always say this, that people don't understand sustainability in full. It's not that if you have plastic which is bad, it is about having multiple families of plastics which are not biodegradable. But if I have it from the same family, it is, right? So you have to be able to communicate the benefit, right? That's one part of sustainability. We need to get that right. The second part, I would say, is like we spoke about waste.
Yeah.
And I think it's about agricultural waste and things like that. If we can improve that, that will get better, significant change things. What we've seen trending globally, and slowly it'll come to India, is to really see the carbon footprint of the products you're developing. Today, there are companies who have tools which can actually calculate how much of a, and then you hear people saying net zero and things like that. That's an area where we believe there is a future opportunity where brands can start saying, this is the carbon footprint of my product, and therefore consumers are making a very informed choice. So you're actually putting down the nutrition part of your story, you're saying the carbon impact of my story, or the sort of global the carbon footprint of my brand and all of that. I think that's going to be very informative for consumers.
I want to talk about catering. It's such a big business. I'll tell you why. I mean, I keep going to all these corporate offices in these American companies. I've been observing the caterers there. They talk about the wastage. They talk about the quality and the calories of the food. It's Indian food being served, but they're very focused on health. It's very interesting that they talk about if you eat dal, this is the nutrition. And they put it out on a board. And it's very interesting that even catering companies, these companies have outsourced the catering to somebody else, and they've specified that you need to have standards. Is that a good thing?
Absolutely, it's 100%. It's a good thing.
And do these caterers work with you? That's a great opportunity, right?
Yeah. So we have, and we do some stuff around food service and things like that. The other thing that a lot of the companies and who have invested behind putting up very high quality operations at the back end, serving very safe food, and I keep saying it's not about just healthier food, it is about giving good safe food. And we've seen this with a lot of the fresh food delivery formats that we work with, about making sure again standardization, getting everything right at the back end to ensure that the food is safe. You're informing the consumers about that fact that, let's say, for example, I'm going to a office and I say I'm taking a millet poha, versus taking a regular flat, white rice poha. What's the difference? Why should I? At least you're informing and educating the consumer. Whether they make that choice every time, probably not, but that's okay. As long as you're making that information clear to them,
Okay. When you trace back the history of work and how industrialization has changed work, everybody's busy. We get that. But India is in this cusp of that. I mean, by 2027, India will still be 60%, of course, agrarian based, but that 40% will be urban. How will food change then? How will the experience of food change? Will it be in the West? It's also ready to eat, but it's also hybrid, where they give you fresh produce in a package form, but they also give you the recipe to make things. A couple of brands in India are experimenting with that. With busy men and women can just put the ingredients in a pan, stir fry it or steam it or whatever, and then voila, you still have this aspiration that you cooked it yourself. Is that going to remain in India? Is it going to happen in India? What will it be fresh that's still a driver in India?
So in urban India, I think convenience is going to be a very important thing. People are going to look for more convenient solutions. May or may not be completely ready to eat just as yet, because you also have your domestic help who will probably come and cook some food for you, etc. Or you order on Swiggy and whatever, you'll get food.
One job that's not going to go away is the domestic help who can cook.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can make their life easier as well, right?
Because they can serve multiple families.
Exactly.
The prep is easier.
Exactly. So I think ready to cook, ready to eat, this kind of a space, convenience is going to be an important driver. People are going to be less, they're going to be more pressure of time and all of that stuff.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, you don't want to compromise on having a, fresh food experience, a healthier experience, things like that. You don't want to have unsafe kind of stuff. So that's going to be one important thing. In the peri-urban, oblique, rural, etc., it's still going to be a lot more fresh food delivery, fresh food made at home, But I think where it might change there is to look at, let's say, for example, which urban India transformed from getting your atta ground in a chakki to buying a packaged atta. I think that progression is going to happen more in the rural and semi-urban kind of towns, where from getting fresh masalas, you're getting into packaged masala, safety, all that stuff is going to be important. Whereas in urban, it's about convenience. The other thing that's going to be very interesting in urban is experience. So everybody wants to have trying out different things even at home. So something like, I went to a food service place the other day in a large office, and they had Hyderabadi cuisine and Maharashtrian cuisine, and
they have a live counter. And
I was like, wow! I said, this is amazing, because even while you are at work, you want to try different things. I think we really want to be looking out and getting global cuisines and whatnot. So I think that aspiration is there, and we will want that.
Somebody, I've had authentic Italian food in Bangalore.
Yes.
I mean, it's as authentic as when you have it in Italy itself.
Yeah.
And Indians are aspiring to that.
We
level
aspire for that experience. Yeah. So I think that's going to be important. The third area we do see is, yes, people still want to go back to what is your comfort food, your dal chawal and all that. So you want to have all that.
At least our generation won't, but what about the ones that come in? Your daughter and son, for example, or my daughter, I mean, many years away.
For them, everything is, let's order it on that app and it'll get delivered all of that.
I hope it's fresh, man. I hope people live to the promise of fresh traceability. And
that's exactly where we are working with a lot of these companies, and who are reaching out to us and saying, how do we ensure that we've got our back end straight, which is delivering good, clean, safe food. That's important.
And how important is food for families?
Food for families? What do you mean? Sorry.
Food for communities.
Communities, yeah.
I mean, they say that, a family that eats together stays together kind of thing.
Yeah.
And is that a narrative that will happen in India as well? Or it'll be more Western driven? I mean, urban areas. I know it's more personal. But how's that changing? Because that will have a story on how we consume food too.
Yeah. I mean, in urban India, I'm sure we can talk about our own families, right? How many times we'll be all sitting together. We try hard. We'll sit together and eat. We still want to do
But like our devices, we have our own individual choices.
like my kids, I mean, one is in college, one is in high school and stuff like that.
I've
got classes, I've got my stuff, I'm taking it up and eating,
so
right?
They've got their own choices
They've
of food
got their own choices of food. They want to do their own activities. So we are moving in the direction of what we've seen in the West, but would we want to have it more as, sitting together? I think the larger part of India would still want to sit together and eat. And we've seen this in COVID a lot, by the way. I don't know if you lived in a community, the amount that people helped around and passed on food made it my home to somebody else's home and things like that. We did a lot of that,
we did
right?
A lot of sharing, yes.
Yeah, and then people said, "Oh yeah, I love Bengali food. I love Kurgi food."
Absolutely, and that's how all these new businesses were born around baking from an apartment and serving only that complex.
Absolutely.
How many ideas came about?
So I think we are in a fabulous place when it comes to food,
And so is your journey.
Thank you.
And what's the website again?
It's www.thinkingfolks.com. So yeah, people should visit our website, see what we do, and happy to connect with, and we are happy to work with people who want to bring in some, good products to market, which make a real difference to consumers and things like that. I mean, for sure. So we'd like to work with, any kind of company.
I want to end this interview with a personal question. How does a food scientist, spend time other than thinking folks and food all the time? How do you unwind? Read or watch movies, or what do you do?
You ask my family or you ask my employees, they'll say she probably never unwinds.
You're an entrepreneur.
Because exactly, right? Because you're all the time working for, and just trying to say, okay, what's the next thing, etc.
That's 35 mouths to feed, and absolutely, you should not unwind. I mean, seriously, I should learn a thing or two. I'm only 2 years old in the journey, and you're, 10 years? So it's amazing. So you don't unwind. But how do you unwind?
No, I will.
Come on, you do have time to unwind. What do you do?
Right. No, so I love listening to people speak, and maybe today it's podcasts and that kind of stuff, but I love listening to people's views on things. So I love listening to interviews and things like that, whether it's TV, whether it's just sitting on the net and looking at all of that kind of stuff.
Particular interesting topics? Is it again food or technology too?
It could be technology too. I've been very interested in the last year or two on this whole space of AI and things like that. So I want to actually probably do a program and understand how to do it better.
AI and printed food and all that.
Yeah, 3D printed food and stuff like that. I still like to listen to things which is around my subject topics like nutrition. I'm very passionate about that, and something I love to listen more about that. I love to travel, so I love sort of trying out new things, and I'm a foodie, so I love to try out new cuisines, go to restaurants, whatever.
What
do a lot of that.
Now?
So just recently this summer we went to Japan, and I can tell you this, Japanese food was of course fabulous, but what I loved about that country was even an Italian food was served to perfection, perfection, right?
It's just like anything that they make.
Yeah, I had Indian food there. One of my friends said, you have to try this Indian restaurant. I said, are you kidding me? I'm coming to Japan. I'm not having Indian food. And I can tell you that Indian restaurants served some amazing Indian food.
Japanese philosophy in Japan itself is on my bucket list. Like, if you say Indian food is so precise, I know it's really precise, right?
It's super. It's like amazing. So I've done Spain, I've done Japan, multiple countries and things like that. I just love going out. I was in UK a couple of weeks ago and we said, okay, it was raining. And we said, we're Nepalese food.
We should actually do a podcast on how the food around different markets has changed. I think UK is such a melting pot, right? There's different foods there now.
I said, I had Nepalese food one day, and then I had Mediterranean or something, which was all again. I think people have just gone down to the, give that really perfect, authentic tasting food. You will appreciate it.
We talk about food like it's rain. Like in England, they talk about the weather. We talk about food in India like that, right? I'm so glad you said that you travel and get to know food and cuisines. But we should also give a shout out to the ecosystem. The ecosystem of food is just coming in place.
Yes.
Right? It includes VCs, there's finance. But there's other things like regulation coming together, right?
Yeah. So, and again, that's been another strong USP of ours, and partly because of all the experience we've had in the last 10 years, the ecosystem we've built has been exceptionally strong. So you have, of course, VCs and portfolio companies that we work with on one side. The other side, we have a lot of suppliers that we work with, and some of them who are, some of them are large companies, some of them are smaller, supplier ecosystem. So you're able to give all kinds of solutions. You tell me this is the right price and things like that. So you can do price, solution, all that stuff. Universities has been a fabulous, another part of ecosystem. Today they are, I think even in India, apart from generating great talent, I think we are evolving there. Today we go to universities in Mysore or Bombay and,
Mysore as a food institute.
Yes. And we use their pilot plants. They say, okay, fine, pay for use. Just come, use our institute, use the pilot facilities we have, and, create your products. We have created products for Singapore with our, institute in Mysore, right?
And Mysore is just an hour away. It's so close to the new highway that you
today there are some of the other institutes are actually creating incubation centers where startups can come, produce their stuff over there, right? Things like that. I mean, that's something we want to do in the future as we go along, is literally have almost like an incubation center. Hey, come. You've got a product, we can sort of develop it for you, but also manufacture it for you. Stuff like that.
And I can see the passion with which you built Thinking Fox. I'd advise everybody to come and visit your lab. I will. My visit is due.
Please do.
I will. And what else?
In fact, we're moving in January. We finished 10 years.
So that's the lab that I want to come to.
Absolutely, you must.
Right?
So, it's like a nice, good 14,000 square feet of space. We've got our labs. We've got a nice
come test
chefs.
Your food there.
We've got chefs creating great food, and we've got consumer science center as well. So we'll have consumers coming in, tasting our products, things like that.
I'm looking forward to the chefs, meeting the chefs and
absolutely, please do that.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.